Going live any second now. Let's mute that. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. As Mr. Burns would say. All right. Let me take a moment and let the Facebook folks know that I am broadcasting live on YouTube. Not the boob tube, but the YouTube. Okay, here we go. Go into my Facebook page. And while that's opening up, okay, it's open now. Classic Facebook is going away soon and being replaced with this ugly, unwieldy interface. All right. Okay. So let me post here. All right, come on, Facebook. You don't usually take this long. Okay, Lush Tongue Sound Meditation, Improv, and Musings. The 42nd episode live on YouTube. All right. There we go. Let's share. Let's share far and wide. Okay. Post. That is posting. That has been posted. And here we go. Okay. So, my name is Anna Mae. This is Lush Tongue Sound Meditation, Improv, and Musings. The first 41 episodes of this series happened on Facebook. Sometimes through Facebook Live, sometimes through Zoom, sometimes through StreamYards. I experimented with a lot of different ways to get my message out there. And so I am now expanding to YouTube. And Instagram and all those other fun platforms. So I like to always begin with a few announcements and ohms. Let's actually start with ohms. So OM is a Sanskrit term that encapsulates a lot of meaning. I like to kind of distill it as a term for the sound of universal consciousness, like the sound of all things through all lifetimes, all the cycles are captured in that word, in that sound, Om. So you can sing it, you can chant it in unison with me in harmony, or you can create your own improvised melody based on Om. All right, here we go. So that's part of the sound meditation aspect of Lush Tongue, sound meditation, improv, and musings. Improvisation is mentioned because the work that I have been doing out in the world up until COVID was leading people in different kinds of song circles. They could be song circles involving songs that they know, folk songs, that kind of thing. But by and large, they were improvised songs, like improvised choir, actually creating parts on the spot in real time. There are many structures for that, but the most popularized structure is called a circle song, where you have people in a circle singing. And you have a conductor or a group of conductors who create improvised parts to give to different people within the circle. And it's a very beautiful, uplifting experience of creative fellowship. Any member of the circle could step inside and become the conductor. Um, so it's leading and following and listening deeply, like all these beautiful relational skills and musical skills are developed through this process of these various processes of group singing. So that's what I do. And in making the shift to um, sharing what I do in this online context, I've been leading online singing workshops. Now, those of you who have technical know how, you know that it's challenging to have people sing with the same sense of immediacy online as we do when we're just together in a room or in a park and just spontaneously combusting, spontaneously singing. Um, so there's a lot more sequential work that happens online and kind of back and forth and call and response, working together in very small clusters of 2 and 3 people. So it's a different experience. It's a beautiful experience, and this medium is very different than the in-person medium. So it's been quite a learning curve for me and other song leaders, choir directors, you know, theater directors to kind of reconfigure how we go about doing things in this medium. So all that to say, I've been experimenting with, just singing melodies just like that, singing call and response improvisations where the response is invisible because it's happening on the other side of the screen in your house. But I trust that you're doing it along with me. Um, so those kinds of containers. I've shared some looping work. I've shared some pre-recorded work, and I'll continue to do that. And as far as musings, my work throughout my life has had some elements, some combination of music as word sound power, and music as a vehicle of consciousness expansion. So I tend to muse on all things consciousness expansion, soul development, self development, personal development, all those realms. And in addition to this video series that I do, I also have a women's book club called Soul Insights Self Development Book Club. And so some of the concepts that come up in that book club uh, get teased here in this video as well. So yeah, it's a really exciting time with how all of these passions of mine are feeding into each other. Also, for those of you who've watched the first 41 episodes that are on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Lush Tongue, so you just go to facebook.com/LushTongue, you'll notice that my set is a little bit different today because I'm in a different room because I'm moving. And so I've got a bunch of stuff packed elsewhere in my home, in my soon to be not home because I'm moving on to the next home. Um, but yeah, I'm in here today, so you might hear a little echoey thing because it's nice and spacious. All the furniture is out of here. So it's a time of this whole year has been a time of what I call upheaval, chaos, upset, and reset. Speaking of upheaval, chaos, upset, and reset. This particular video, number 42, happens to be I happen to be filming it on a day where there's going to be a presidential debate. This has been the most eventful, one of the most eventful election years in my life. Um, Bested perhaps only by Barack Obama's um, first election as president. So I was asking myself, what spiritual principles can I glean from this circus atmosphere that I feel has been perpetuated by much of the political talk that is out here in the atmosphere. So this is not a political show per se. This is really, when I talk about musings, I talk about spiritual principles, uh, psychic, soul, physical, mind, body, soul connections to all the different aspects of life. And so politics happens to be on the brain for me today, in addition to just all the topsy turviness of life under quarantine. I even noticed today how, and this brings me to the theme of tonight's show, how there was one news item. I typically avoid mainstream news, but a few things seep in now and then. The two different bits of news from two different channels. One said that coronavirus is like at the highest levels ever, and then over here, which is not funny, which is horrible. But what's funny is there was another news channel that said, all these businesses are starting to open up and people are feeling more safe now that cases have gone down. And I'm like, which which wolf should I feed? Which news is true? And they both may contain elements of truth, um, and elements of paradox and contradiction. So how do we, drum roll please, how do we unite polarities? Um, the notion of uniting polarities is a concept that was first inspired for me by a friend of mine who uh, has a very interesting set of polarities. you know, like many people um, who are on a path of spirituality and creativity and making the world a more connected, more interconnected, enlightened place. I observed him. I observed how he has these two sides of him, that stand out very distinctly. It's one side that's very spiritual and charismatic and big, like big performer energy. And then there's this other side that is very uh, playful and goofy and and raunchy, And he was actually the first person I heard use the phrase uniting of polarities. And that always kind of stuck in my mind like, ooh, yeah, yeah, I can dig that. Like integrating all the different facets of ourselves. Um, and so that brings me to politics. So in the United States, there is uh, this narrative of, this wing is the correct wing, and this wing is the wrong wing, and vice versa. And I ask myself, does anyone else see that this wing has certain concepts uh, that actually do benefit the greater good of society, and this so-called opposite wing, they also have values that I think benefit the greater good of society. So if I can see the highest possibilities that exist in both wings, then wouldn't that imply that there's some third possibility, a clearing of a clearing of possibility? That's the phrase I'm looking for. A field beyond right and wrong, as Rumi said. Um, but there's such a persistent push to keep these false polarities, false dichotomies going, and to choose a side that's based strictly on the parameters that the leaders of those wings espouse, as opposed to taking the best of of both worlds, taking the best of all worlds to create something to create something that does this, that lifts us all where we belong. And so, uniting polarities, it makes me think of how in the micro there are the different facets within ourselves that are that could use integration. It's a sort of classical European psychology. Jung and those folks, they tend to characterize it as the light and the shadow side being the disowned, repressed, denied parts of our psyches. Um, I am continually looking for language to describe that concept that isn't so tied to uh, that isn't so tied to, well, color. Because when I think light and shadows, light and dark, and that has really messed up humanity as far as uh, like the idea of like projecting the ideas of what it means to embody the shadow, like projecting those ideas onto actual people, as if they're only certain specific people who are the shadow of humanity, which is ridiculous. Like each individual carries shadow aspects of our being. And shadow isn't necessarily wrong or negative. It's simply what we, to a large degree, may interpret as a negative or or wasteful or unable to be integrated. Now, do I would say that there are certain shadow expressions that are genuinely harmful, first to the person harboring them and to everyone around them. And so I think I think those shadows may need some special handling. I'm thinking, trafficking of humans and torture, like that shadow side of humanity. It may take more than your everyday therapist to integrate those kind of shadows individually and in the aggregate. Um, but circling back to integrating these various aspects of ourselves. So, it happens on the individual level, or we have the opportunity to have it happen. For many people, it may never happen. For many people, they, go on to their graves, never feeling that sense of wholeness and integration and such. But for many of us, that possibility does exist because we have that awareness and that willingness to look, that willingness to examine our lives. Um, and when I think of how that lives in the micro individually and then in the macro, writ large upon the world in terms of geopolitics, in terms of our economic systems, our governmental systems, our systems of trade, um, our systems of culture, of popular culture. It's like the way we interact with each other based on the scripts in our head, and those scripts being based on certain polarities. Um, we're in an interesting era, I believe, where there's a lot of grappling with finding third ways, finding other possibilities, thinking outside the box or thinking outside of those two boxes. Um, and when I say polarity, let me just see what have you. Oh, okay. Um, when I say polarity, I it's a little bit of a misnomer because when we think polarity, we think one and two, thing one and thing two, and that's all that exists. I actually see polarity as two sort of endpoints with a spectrum in between. So we got um, trying to think of something other than black and white, night and day, blue and purple. Um, okay, we'll say red and blue. So you got one pole over here that is, the truest red right in the center of the frequency that we call red. And then here you have the truest blue. Hey, look at that. I didn't do that on purpose. I swear. And then in between you have all these varying shades of purple along the spectrum. And some people may argue in the kind of the postmodern sense that there is no true red and there is no true blue. There's only an infinite continuum. I don't subscribe to that notion. I do believe that there are poles. I believe there are magnetic poles. I believe that there are um, colors that are the richest, most vibrant, most on a physical, on a scientific level. If you were to like look at the specific frequency that a color corresponds to, there is like the reddest red and the bluest blue and the yellowest yellow, as far as primary colors. And then there's various shades and tints and combination when you start combining different primary colors with each other. But there are poles. I do believe that there are certain laws. That could be another way to think of it. Um, and those laws may exist in some kind of continuum. That may be a deeper rabbit hole to go into, but there are like concrete poles that we can kind of look to. Um, and what more do I have to say about that? Okay, so yeah, writ large in the macro, I think that the same battles that we're seeing being perpetuated in our media with keeping the false narrative going that these are like two ships in the night and never the two shall meet. I think more and more everyday people are waking up and seeing that there actually are points of intersection and there are points of greater good and policies that could uplift us all, ways of interacting with each other, uh, the culture that we collectively build, and how we live our lives and exchange value with each other. We can see that there's room for improvement, and there isn't necessarily one wing or another that has all the answers. It's impossible for any one government group or any one group of leaders or any one think tank to have all the answers. Um, I'm a big believer in the interconnectedness of us all, and I'm excited for the ways in which that interconnectedness is unfolding for people on the individual level, you know, in many ways out of necessity, out of survival, um, and also the ways in which more and more people are finding ways of thriving through finding that community. So I've been thinking a lot about home lately, in light of moving out of the place that I called home for 8 years, as far as this specific apartment. And then in the larger sense, New York City, living here for, gosh, over 2 decades. kind of blows my mind. Um, and then home in the existential sense. So we've got, the home that is me, that is this vehicle that's been carrying me through life. We have home, the space that I'm in right now. We have the home of Brooklyn, New York City, home of the United States, and then existential home, palace of many rooms. And in the existential home, those rooms that get neglected, the, the, the rooms that Jung would call, Jung would call the shadow. So, how do we bring light into those rooms so that the entire house can stand and shine and radiate? Maybe maybe there's some aspect of the home that is structurally unsound. Maybe the foundation is, maybe there's like a crook or a kink in the foundation, thus rendering everything a little off kilter. How do you fix that foundation? By first acknowledging that there is a crack in that foundation, uh, and then fixing it. you know, as simple as that sounds, in our own individual lives and in our communal lives, I see these themes re-emerging everywhere of how do I become more of what I'm meant to be? How do we become more of what we could collectively be? And so that is the question I ponder to you when it comes to um, politics, spirituality, and who who you believe you're here to be, and what you think that we as a collective, thinking specifically of the United States right this moment, but also the world at large, what are we, how are we capable of evolving collectively? Like, what can that look like? Um, I read something recently, a historian who talked about how there has been, some kind of war or another pretty much perpetually forever. That was his assertion. I would have to do more specific research on that. Um, it rang true though in the sense that when it comes to humans engaging with each other, there does seem to be a constant in projecting that which is too terrifying for us to face within ourselves, projecting those aspects onto other people. And it's that first projection, like that's the first war. Before any hands are laid, before any gun is shot, before any weapon is shot, it's that projection is the first violence. That's one way you could put it. And because that's a constant, dare I say, because that is a constant psychic landmine for us to work through. And it is work to learn to own your own projections, to really be able to like pull down your own film screen and see your life, your behavior, your motivations, your shadows, or your unexpressed desires, hopes, and fears, to see them reflected back to you, and being able to just sit there and receive it and flinch and feel all the feelings, but still be able to receive it and recognize it as yours, as opposed to putting the next person's face on that film screen saying that it's you. You're the one with the problem. There's something wrong with you. You know, you're the snowflake. You're the elitist. No, we all have a little bit of snowflake and a little bit of elitist in us. Just to use those examples of the shadow projection that I see happen on both sides um, of the political landscape here in the US. Uh, your mileage may vary in these examples depending on where you're watching this from and what's going on in your respective country, your respective government. Um, yeah, so that's what I have to say about that. So as far as bringing us together and uniting and integrating of of our polarities, of the aspects of our being that seem to contradict each other, that seem paradoxical to each other. Like, how can these aspects of me peacefully coexist within me? Like, how can I be raunchy and spiritual? How can I be um, conservative minded in these contexts and more liberal minded in these contexts? How do I integrate it all? So that is the intention that I'm carrying into our closing Om. What will it take to integrate all the different facets of our being individually, collectively, cosmically? All right. Because if there are aliens out there, I'd love to meet them. I'd love to know that it's not just us floating on this rock. So, I welcome the multiverse. Um, so, with that in mind, let's close out with Om. All right. Oh, actually, before we close out with Om, let me just check here if there are any um, comments that I need to address. Okay, I think we're good for now. We'll pick up steam on YouTube. Got a good thing going on Facebook. I'm excited to make this transition here to YouTube. Okay. All right, it looks like we're good. Let me just refresh on Facebook, and eventually I'll share some clips on Instagram as well. Okay, looks good. So before I close out, I will also mention that you can like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and this is true across all the platforms. Like, whatever way allows you to stay abreast of Lush Tongue, sound meditation, improv, and musings, do so. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share. And also, if you'd like to make a contribution, you are welcome to do that. And I'll put all this information in the description. You can send a contribution via Venmo, via Cash App, via PayPal. All of them have the same name. Venmo, it's at Lush Tongue. Cash App, we got the cash tag, Lush Tongue. PayPal is a special link, paypal.me/Lush Tongue. That's paypal.me/Lush Tongue. So thank you all for all of you who've made contributions and those of you who will make contributions. Okay, I think I got all the announcements. Oh, nope, one more. This is why I'm going to make a script. Improvising, so used to just like rattling it off. But there's so much I want to share. So one thing is I have a newsletter that I send out on Tuesdays, Lush Tongue Tuesdays. Anna May, that's my name. You can get on that mailing list by clicking on the link that will be in the description. All right, now I think we're ready to ohm on out. As we're ohming, a few things to pay attention to. Uh, as I mentioned, you can ohm in unison with me, and for those who uh, never took a music theory class, that just means you sing the same pitch that I'm singing. You can ohm in harmony with me. I mean, you can sing a different pitch. You can create your own improvisation to sing over the ohm. Sometimes I ohm just 3 times to represent birth, death, and rebirth. And sometimes I just keep it going because it just feels so good. It's like a sonic massage. You can feel the vibration all over. It's great. All right, so here we go. Oh. Whew. All right. This concludes the first YouTube edition of Lush Tongue Sound Meditation, Improv, and Musings, and the 42nd episode. Uh, I started this shortly, very shortly after the quarantine happened. I think my first episode was March 16th or somewhere around there. So you can comb through all the older episodes on my Facebook page, facebook.com/lushtongue, and I will see you next Tuesday. Bye.